Okay, so before we get into the next section on how you look at materials and find out if they have value for your students, I would like to hear from the counselors a little bit about book selection and what you need. Can you talk about those things a little bit? Where's the mic? The mic just left? There we go. Okay. Counselors, can you guys raise your hands?
I'll start.
Okay, we got a person over there. What's your name?
My name is Teresa.
Okay. What do you need?
I think there's so many things out there about depression, anxiety, but I think what I would love to see more where students can read about families that aren't functioning at their peak. Because I think a lot of our students come from very unsupportive families. And I think, but also coming from the context that they came from dysfunctional families and so on and so on and so on. So something around family systems and how we can arise from that. So.
Okay. So maybe some more examples of books that are more positive, give positive examples. And
I would say even positive and examples of how other people are struggling with some of the same issues and how they've arisen past. Because many of our students are choosing to come from college and they don't have the support, either the financial support or the emotional support to even be in college because the parents, family members are having their own issues. They're having their own trials and tribulations. So somehow finding books that could resonate that, yes, there's some difficulty in your family, there's some dynamics that are not the most helpful, but here are some characters that have risen above that. And
okay, so not being Pollyanna, talking about the real issues, but offering some kind of alternatives that might be positive and helpful and so forth. Okay, counselors again. When you go to a library and you look for books, what kind of help do you need in finding what you need? How do you know what you're looking for? What kind of questions might you ask a librarian or a book specialist? Teresa.
I get this sounds really. I would want to know, like, what are the different areas? Because I might not know exactly what I'm looking for until I go to that area. So the different, the areas that deal with personal issues or family issues, and I know there's a librarian term that I'm not touching right now, but something that can give us some topics, in areas. So that I know if that we need to go to HF, whatever. The subject headings, thank you.
Okay.
Then we can go and browse and somehow, we might not even know what we're looking for until we get there to look at it.
And you don't have to.
Right.
Right. Okay. What else?
I think it would be good to know different levels of reading, depending on the students that we have, if they're in reading 041, if these books are going to be appropriate or not. So I think that would be good to know too.
Okay, levels. What else? Okay, this is a pretty, go ahead.
Well, kind of what you said is, have you seen any trends in any of these? Are books getting checked out in these subject matters? Are you finding that students are really drawn to certain types of books?
Okay. Now let's just.
One of the things when we're talking about books with these students, like they're already overcommitted, and you're asking them to commit several hours to sit down and read this, unless you're only telling them to read a chapter, okay? So should we be looking for books specifically, or articles, okay, or films where they're making less of a commitment? We really got to think about this. Like, how deep do we want to go? You give them a book and they don't like it, they're not going to come back and ask you, oh, what's next? You know what I mean? If they've put 6 hours in and didn't get something
Right.
from it, you
And-
know,
and the
they're not going to
resource-
come
yeah.
back to you.
No, that's great. That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. So films, articles, and also books on tape. Yep, yeah. Because if they're commuting, you know, that's, yeah. Okay. Librarians are our book specialists and our resource experts. What can you do for mental health people? Come on, tell them what you can do for them.
Just want to say Joe's on our team.
Oh, sorry, tough act to follow, eh? I'm not recommending any books.
So a question for the librarians. If I were to come to you and say, I have a student who is in her late 30s and she is an adult survivor of childhood sexual abuse and she's African American and she wants to understand more about the dynamics of childhood sexual abuse and, you know, how adult survivors make it through and cope, et cetera, would you be able to find something for me?
So I think we'd first start asking more questions. Is she, reading level? Does she want something fiction or nonfiction? Does she like stories? Would she identify with poetry more? And we could go from there. I think we have to have a reference interview with you, and we like to have reference interviews with the actual people, but some people are not going to come in and feel comfortable asking for that. So you guys are kind of the go-between. So we'll probably provide that, and then we will look to see what we have. And if we don't have something, we're going to tell you where to find it as well, and just make a couple different suggestions. So we can do that.
So what your librarian will do is they'll interview you, they'll ask you for more information that you may not have. They might make you a little uncomfortable because you might not know enough about your client. You might realize, I really don't know, but I think. What you also need to develop between the two of you is trust. People don't like looking stupid. I'm the psychology expert, and I don't know what my client needs to read, and then this librarian's going to kind of look down their nose at me and say, well, what do you mean you don't know where they are developmentally? They won't do that. So just kind of forget that. But you got to have this trusting relationship because you'll be working as a team together. So.
Well, and I think I would add too from the librarian side, you always want to find a thing. Like that's what we like. We like to find that thing, hunt it down and get it. And I always find myself having to check that desire. You want to find the right thing, not just a thing. And one thing with our collection, especially if we want to move in directions connected to this with fiction, is that we generally buy classics for lit classes, and then we buy some fun stuff. And deeper, more meaningful pieces of fiction that may hit some of these topics, we may or may not have. And we may have to do some work on our end to get the right stuff, because I don't know if our collection right now is geared toward that. And that's why we wanted to do this and have these conversations. But I think for us too, it's like I always like to just give and give and give, and then not always being a lot as opposed to that precise one thing. And that maybe it's just me, but I think it's a librarian thing too.
Do you have an interlibrary loan with some of the public libraries around here? So if you do some digging and some research, you might be able to find several different options. Or you might come up with another thing that librarians can do for you is generate what? Yes. So the thing that your librarians can do for you right now, and this is what you can do that's really, really inexpensive, and just have a couple more nice lunches. Your food here is very nice. And sit down and come up with lists of topic areas that you're seeing in your counseling sessions and that you're seeing in the checkout area. Come up with your joint list, see where they come together, and come up with your list of interests for what you need to help your students. You have large groups moving into this part of the world that may not have always lived in this part of the world. You may need to have more information about mobility and movement cycles, about different ethnic groups that are moving in, so, and understanding, that's be very, very helpful. There's lots of things that you can generate. But they can get you lists, and they love to generate lists. That's like the second favorite thing to get in the right thing. It's like the list. The list is always, here's your options. And then an annotated bib is always very, very helpful. If you can read a little bit about what the book's about, that'll save you some time too. So those are some things, and librarians love to do research. They research and find information all the time. Librarians, over at this table, I'm going to pick on you. You said there's some things that you can do for counselors that they don't know that you can do for them. Can you talk about what some of those things might be?
So when I was doing my research, I surveyed school social workers in a K through 12 setting on how they utilize a librarian when they use bibliotherapy. So I found that a lot of counselors didn't have an understanding of our educational background. All librarians have to have master's degrees. They weren't aware. So, and they had one bad experience with a librarian, so they didn't want to go back and try another one. Because some librarians might not be comfortable recommending books like this. So I think if they've had a bad experience, they're kind of just put off. So I think so being knowledgeable of what we can do, like I said, we like to find the right thing. We will find you resources to find the right thing. We like to dig deep. So we might not have an answer for you in that 5-minute interaction reference interview, but we can get back to you. I mean, it might take us some time, but we will get back to you. So you can't need it right away sometimes. And again, making lists or, we did a research guide.
Right.
So
you can start to generate them, slowly. The first biggest topic that you mentioned to me, Lynn, was anxiety and depression. That's a big one. That's pervasive throughout all of society. It particularly hits hard with students, especially first-gen students who are really struggling for their place and not really always having the support that they need. That can really make kids a little just wacky. Yeah, so, okay. So did you know all these things that they could do for you? Yeah. Some people suffer from something called library trauma. Did anybody ever grow up with a parent that said if you don't return your book on time, the police are going to show up and you're going to be fined and have to pay a lot of things? Did anybody ever have something like that happen? No. I did. And for years I wouldn't step in a library because I had one book that was overdue and I thought they were just going to find that under my bed and put me in prison. So, but Paula McMillan helped me, and so after 12 years of researching with librarian, I realized that they're great places. But actually, they're wonderful, safe places for students. And students really do find, especially students who don't have a lot of money, the libraries are resources for them that they can, it's there for them. I mean, it's just all they have to do is bring it back. So it's just amazing. So it's a great thing this is a really great thing that our country does, investing in libraries. Many a youngster who was a first-generation student told me that it was a librarian that told them they could go to college. So, yeah, so amazing. Okay, so here's some things that y'all have in common. Let's look at books. Let's tell you what I look for when I'm looking for a book and when I teach people. Okay, first of all, Thank you. Yeah. Here we go, right there, the magnifier. Okay, this is the content of the phobia book that we're going to look at, and we're going to actually go through that and do an exercise. So I'm going to take this right now, though. I need to. Okay, you go to Amazon.com, and this is a book that's a classic in the field. And it's called the Bibliotherapy Handbook. It's by Mary Hines Berry and Arlene Hines. And I said Berry and Berry before. It's actually Hines and Hines. And it's called Biblio Poetry Therapy. And you go through it, and it actually tells you how to work with clients using using bibliotherapy. It's about 30 years old now as a book, but it's still a very good book. And there's yet to be anything in the field that actually explains to you. So this is just a little hint for you if you really do want to find out more about bibliotherapy. Heinz, Berry, and Heinz, Bibliopoetry Therapy, a handbook. I love handbooks. I do like self-help books. I think they're tons of fun. So that's a book for you to to look at. Okay. All right. If you want to find out a little bit about my work, some of you may have already gone to this site. It's pretty fun. But I do want to give credit to Paula McMillan. If you look down here, this is Paula on the bottom with her old dog Disney. And Paula and I worked on this project together. This is Mary Graham, a doctoral student who did research on bibliosupervision with counselors. What she did with her research was she used children's books with adults about how they were navigating their way through practicum and learning how to work with clients. And she would take children's books about anxiety, fearfulness, fright. Lost in the Woods was one of the books that she used, and so forth. The 25, 28, 35, 40-year-old students could relate to the book and the stories and their fearfulness, because of course it was what? It was the character in the book. They're feeling anxious about being incompetent in a particular setting. So, and she did some really good research on that. And then this is my current colleague, Betty Kirby, and she and I, and then Laura Bruneau will be on this soon. So we collect people who love bibliotherapy, and we work together, and we always try to advance the site a little bit more. So if anybody wants to be involved in this project, you want your picture on there, and you want to contribute some work to that, please let me know. We're always looking for colleagues, and you get your college up there as well, and your position be kind of a fun thing. Okay, so let's go back to this. Okay, so basically, these are the categories that I look at when I'm evaluating a book, or I'm trying to teach somebody the appropriateness of, do they think that this will work with their client population, whatever their client population is. Your client population are students ages 17 through, right. So you go from adolescent to elder. You have the full range of that and everything in between, so to speak. You've got single, you've got married, you've got cohabitating, you've got all kinds of different families and shapes and things that you work with. So your students are, is there a common demographic you think your students have? Any common demographic, aside from anxiety and depression? Is there any? What would be the economic? Are they wealthy? Do most of them work? So, a lot of them work, right? What's your percentage of first gen? Do you know? A third? Think a third? Fifth? Half? Probably about half, yeah. I would guess it's probably about 1/2, yeah. You know, it's really funny, but in Michigan, we have a very low percentage of individuals who actually have 4-year degrees. We're a blue-collar state, you know, and we're really suffering in our state from the downturn of the auto industry and factory industries, where you'd go and your family would get a job, and you'd be in the same industry for your entire life, and when you retired, you would hand it off into your sons and daughters. Usually, yeah, right, those days are over. Mobile society, and there's no job that doesn't require high tech. Liberal arts, librarians. Look what happened to librarians. I mean, everything's tech. You know, so yeah, I mean, the world has really shifted quite a bit. So you have a variation in students, but probably the one thing that they have in common is they're probably all trying to have a better life and prepare themselves for some kind of a better life. So, which is a good thing. You're where the boots hit the ground in terms of the American dream, right here at this college. So if you've decided on a particular topic, you look at the the general information of the book. Is it a workbook? Is it a storybook? Is it a self-help book? You know, you kind of look through the general information. These are the categories: the subject matter itself, the general format and structure. Somebody over there said before, reading level, suitability, so forth. Book length. Now this is where I'm going to talk to you. I totally have this up here because I'm speaking to you. Okay, book length. Nobody likes a long book in our Big Mat Fast Society, Big Mac. I mean, everybody likes to get the sound bites really fast, and they like to get it, you know, like absorbed into the skin so it's immediately in the brain so they know what to do. But usually you have to dig a little deeper. So, but book length is if it's too long, and if you're going to use it like in a group where you're going to do reading, you don't want something that's real long. You want something you can get through pretty fast. Make your point, discuss it, make your point. So you have to be aware of that. You might pre-read a chapter or a paragraph or say, this is just for you. There's something that I read when I'm teaching children child therapy to graduate students from, it's an old book from Violet Oaklander. And it's about childhood. And it's just a paragraph, but it's a very impactful paragraph about how painful childhood is. That most people think it's this dreamy state and everything's so wonderful, and you know, kids play and they're with abandon and all that, when in fact we all know that childhood can be a terrible place with bullying, and you don't know where your next meal is going to be, and you might be a fence hugger in the playground because you have no friends, your social skills, all those kinds of things. So it's a very impactful bibliotherapy project where I read a powerful that's where poetry can come in very powerfully, short stories, narratives, news articles, video clips, all of those kinds of things. You make your impact, you figure out what you're going to do, you have to kind of know what your setting is, where you want to work, and so forth. Text and pictures can be really important, and I think over there's something I want to, go ahead, they're right next to you.
On the book length thing, a conversation I had recently with some lit faculty about students that didn't read and how they would be intimidated by if a book was too big. And one strategy that the faculty member and I talked about, and then he ended up using, was to read out loud with, as we've said, with the students, but trying to get them hooked on that first chapter. And then once they were hooked, they would move through, you know, be more willing because they kind of get what's in there. But getting those first few pages under their belt makes a huge deal.
And you know, and where you can be helpful. If you have a little flair for drama and you don't mind embarrassing yourself, you can read a first page of a book, and you can read it with such, you know, a compelling nature that all of a sudden you might get the kids all fired up, or you might get your students all kind of latched into it. If you ever want to teach anything about what it was like to live in LA in the late 50s and the early 60s around civil rights time, Walter Mosley, one of the best authors. And he writes in a detective genre, and you just read it and you're there. And I used to bring that into some of my social justice classes and some of my other classes about, you know, learning about someone's history. Because people would say things to me like, wow, my family never had money, or they never went through that. And I said, okay, let's talk about legacy. So let's go back in history and look at legacies. So then it's a way of setting a context. It's very, very helpful. So, but you all have books that you love that really make a point that speak to you. And usually it can speak to someone else too. You know, this kind of book here, a poetry memoir, You Remind Me of You. It's pretty short stuff. You can get through it. Shel Silverstein, still very good for wonderful short stories. And if you have students who are not dealing very well with responsibility, you know, there's some really great things in there about, you know, I don't want to get out of bed, I can't get out of it, I have to go to school, and on and on. Oh, I'm going to stay in bed. Oh, what'd you say? It's Saturday? Oh my gosh, up and away. And then he's out, and so all of a sudden all the malingering is gone. But it does bring the point about procrastination, responsibility, and so forth, and it's easy to do. If your students have difficulty reading, and reading is a challenge for them, picture books are really, really great, and so are graphic novels. Many a child, an adolescent, a young adult, an adult, learn how to read because of comic books. Comic books are great. They have all the visual cues that you need. You can follow along, not a whole lot of words. It's great. So, and then the one thing I also want to express, if you've got a lot of second language learners, you might want to have books written in different languages where they, whereas on one page it's English, the other is the language of origin, because that also helps really kids learn how to read better. And if you're studying another language, that's a real good way to understand it as well. So, but these are the different categories. I think that you want to really look at how are you going to use it. So that's what the librarian should ask you. How do you plan on using this book? Because I used to always want stuff with really great pictures. And when I analyze picture books, the pictures have to be congruent with what's being said. And so sometimes, you know, you read a book and you think, oh, I don't, you know, I looked at the picture, it doesn't really match. Well, what many of you may not know, when they actually make books, sometimes the illustrator is paired by the company. It's not necessarily the author isn't always the illustrator. And sometimes they kind of miss what the author's actual intent is. So you could wind up with a message that's kind of like, it's disjointed. Well, one of the reasons why it's not a good match. And then I think probably for most of us, you give your kind of overall impression of the book. You know, and I know when I was a little kid, I'd look through a book and I go, oh, that's got too many words, not enough pictures. You know, and so people have different things that appeals to them. I've never been a big poetry person, but but I do like short stories. You know, some people really get poetry. A lot of your clients won't. You know, some people just don't get it. You know, so it has to appeal. Remember, it's not about you, it's about your students. So even though some of us think it's about us. Okay, so the general format and structure. You assess the plot for cohesiveness, character development, universality of the storyline, and the quality of the text. That's kind of your general format. Subject matter, is it a valuable topic for you? Do you think that it works for you? And identify the, and then I think probably always the bottom line is this. Is this a good subject fit for my client? Sometimes we may diagnose somebody with a major depressive disorder, suicidation, and you know, all of this diagnosis, really dark, hard, sad life. But you know what? They may not be ready to hear all that. You know, you do the systematic approximation. You start using words like, it sounds like you're a little fearful of that. I'm not fearful. Oh, okay, back up. You're thinking in your head, back up. Okay, sounds like you're a little anxious about this. I'm not anxious. What makes you think I'm anxious? Okay, back up. Boy, sound like you're a little unsettled. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I'm thinking, anxious, fearful, scared, you know, but I'm going to stay here for a while. And that is the same with subject areas. It might be just, you know, an approximation, and it might be a very simple story that you read or a simple book that you give them. You know, you might even say this. Here's a book on anxiety and depression. Now, I know that you're not real depressed, but there's some stuff in the beginning on anxiety that might be very appropriate for you. Now, very often what happens is they start reading it, they connect with the subject area, they really like the situation and the answers that are given and the alternatives, and they kind of go right through the book. And they might come in the next time or a couple of weeks later and say, you know, I know that this isn't totally me, but this section right here is me. And that's very, very helpful as well. So you have to know that maybe the book gives them the latitude to move through it. And then you might have your favorite books that work for a lot of your clients. And what I used to do, because a lot of my clients were very, very low income, I would go to the local used bookstore. And I would buy everything that really fit a topic that I liked. And usually they were popular books a year or two old that people would give back or try to sell. And I would give those out. I would just give them to clients, you know. So sometimes they can get them from the public library and so forth. But you know, usually with the self-help books, I would say to them as a diagnosis, here's another way to use bibliotherapy. Highlight everything that feels right to you. And if they come back and the book is covered with yellow or green, then you really know where they are at. So, okay. So client fit is very important. Again, we did talk about reading level and suitability. So I think that you know, some people like short stories, some like poems, some don't. Length of book, important. There you go again, okay? Format, length. Can you use it session to session? Is it a chapter book? Are you going to have 8 sessions on career development? And you know, there's a thing to do on career development each time. Do you guys have career development classes, right? Yeah, do any of you use self-help books for that, or book processes to go through that? Or because that's really good to use some books on career development, because they can go through, they can analyze, they can do an interest inventory, career inventory, and whatnot. That's a form of bibliotherapy, in a sense. Then they can do you can use some techniques ever use some of those techniques? Well, why don't you draw a picture of yourself in your ideal job 10 years from now. Close your eyes. Tell a story about a typical workday that would make you happy. Okay, so those are different techniques that you can use. And then that's story therapy. So that's a form of what we're talking about today. So you can get really, really creative with this. So you can see that, but I'm just trying to give you the bones. But I've been using this for a long, long time, and everyone does music. They use music, read a book, and then or they can pick songs. Bring in the album. Well, they don't bring in albums anymore. Let me go back. Okay, bring in a song or music that speaks to your life. Where are you at now? Songs are stories, and stories tell things to you. And so that's another, or write your own music. Write your own poem about your life, where you want to be. So what's life like for you in college right now? Okay, so you know I'm big on pictures. I'm a really visual person. I love art. And so for me, I'm drawn very often to book covers, which is probably not the best thing to do. But when I had my office and I had all the books for reading for clients, I didn't have them on a shelf like this. I had them on a shelf like this. And very often they were drawn to the picture, and the story may not have matched what the picture said to the student, but they can tell you what they need. So and it's kind of a way of assessing where they're at each week. So that's how I did. I just flipped it that one. I had about 100 different books going in different ways like that. And I think it's really important to look at the quantity and quality of illustrations, and also the respectful nature that people are drawn. That's very important. And again, with stereotyping, but also the respectful nature of it. Because sometimes people draw things and they bring their own prejudices out. And you want to really make sure that when you're looking at something, it's very respectful. And then the question, will this combination of text and images create a therapeutic effect for this particular client? With career counseling books and career counseling texts, gender, age, ethnicity, skin tones, is everybody represented? And we're really trying to do something with young women now in terms of STEM fields and STEM education, not just health education. And it used to be that the images were all pretty much male-dominated, and then it moved to male Asian-dominated. And so we're really trying to look for images that promote all individuals, all ages. Yeah. The one exciting thing that was, well, one exciting thing. There were about 750 exciting things that happened to me when I went to the White House. But the really exciting thing was when they had girls who do code, and all kinds of things about young girls from all different backgrounds talking about science and math and engineering and coding, and it was very, very thrilling to see that. And so, yeah. Okay, so developmental level. Is this right for my client? Is this a good match? We talked about this. Context, environment, and situation. So where are you going to use this? Are you going to use it, are you going to work at a college, library, at home, or the person going to go home? So you look at your client population. When you run career counseling classes, do you have all different age groups in there? Yeah? Okay. That's great. Yeah. but the books will, maybe appeal to different groups in different ways. Do you use a lot of ebooks and things like that, downloaded articles, and are you using a lot of technology now in your classes? Yeah? Can you give me some examples of some things that you're using?
All of our assessments are actually online.
Okay.
So we use online assessment. Oh, sorry.
So interest inventories, assessments, and so
our
forth?
personality assessment, our interest inventory is online. We're on the web all the time doing research with them.
Good. Good. Okay. He needs.
We also do a lot of experiential learning, so activities.
Okay. So tell me about the use of experiential.
So we do, well, I call it traffic jam, but it's just an activity about dealing with critical thinking so that they can use that to critically think about where they want to go with their occupation, what they want to do, and what they want out of life. I do a thing with values continuum where I have like one end of the room is one choice, the other end is the other choice, so you can stand on that line. So we talk about work values, what's important for you in a job, things like that. So we're doing activities like that all the time.
Right, right. Do you ever use it in case analyses?
I haven't.
Yeah,
I don't know if
because you could
anybody else-
use stories about different work environments and cases. Right. Okay, that's a great example. Right, TED Talks are great. Yeah, there were some really great videos a few years ago that came out on plagiarism too. Yeah, so, because I tried to explain to some of the faculty that yes, some of the students are plagiarizing. They're cheating, they're snagging information, they're doing it on purpose. Other students are actually just snagging information like they do on the internet all the time. So they just need to differentiate. You need to teach them the difference, and it's an ethical conversation about when it's okay to snag and when it's not okay to snag. Oh, because a lot of the faculty, well, it's just cheating. Well, it's a different generation. You have to it's not quite cheating. But it looks like cheating. Well, yes, I know. I used Turnitin, and that looked like cheating to me. I said, yes, I know you used Turnitin. Let's talk to the student. Find out what the student actually, just a thought, so. Oh, we're back up in business. This is great. Okay, so look about where you're going to. Know your population, know what you have to do with them. Okay, so do you know what choral reading is? Anybody know what choral reading is? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I keep forgetting about this. When the entire group reads together.
Right. What's really great about choral reading is that it's different from cold oral reading when you're all on, you're on the spot. You're the one on the spot. With choral reading, everybody's reading. So if you make mistakes, nobody really knows. And you hear this voice and you read together and then you can discuss it. So it's sometimes group work, if you want to promote group work or you want to promote some kind of sense of social connection, that's a really great way to use it. And that really works well with people who are depressed, getting them up doing things and so forth. Reading to the client, art and drawing and so forth. So we talked about some of those therapeutic ways. And other evaluation considerations, I think you really want to look at the level of trauma that's been identified with your client. It's particularly important now with returning militaries, families, and students. Sometimes it might just be too fresh for them to, like Lynn was saying, if a young student comes and wants to talk and learn more about sexual abuse, or someone wants to talk more about rape or something that's traumatic has happened to them, accidents that happen, suicides that happen in families and so forth, they'll let you know how ready they are. But you have to ask, are you ready to read more about that, or and so forth. And I also think that when one of the topics that we often talk about suicide, that if a client gets suicidal, we say, our students, we have a crisis, students suicidal. But sometimes they have survivor guilt. It's not the student themselves, but it's the family member who's dealing with it, or maybe not survivor guilt, just questions, lingering questions. And I'm always curious. I always ask students, well, why do you want to research that particular area for your dissertation? And they always know that it's something very close to their heart that happened. So, so those are things to know. Okay, so application with anxiety. That's what we're going to talk about now. So do you need like maybe a 5-minute stretch and then we can get back into it? And you feel like you need to stretch? I'm seeing some yawns, so probably let's get up and shake it out a little bit, and then we'll be back in about 5 after. Okay.